right. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvisha vahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shantihi Chaitanyam Sarvagam Sarvam Sarvabhuta Guhashayam Yat Sarva Vishayatitam Tasmai Sarvavide Namaha. Very good. Welcome back. We continue our study of Upadesha Sahasri. We've come to chapter 10, where we found it's focused entirely on nididhyasana, Vedanta contemplation. We've had several discussions on what is nididhyasana and what is its purpose, so I won't repeat that, but there's one question which reveals some perhaps still lack of understanding. We'll just see that one question. It'll introduce today's class nicely. The question is that once you're enlightened, you remain enlightened, and that knowledge never goes away. Also, that enlightenment is a state of liberation, mukti, freedom from suffering. Then, why is it, remember the lion story? It's a reference to that metaphor. Why then must the lion see its face in the mirror again and again to break habitual thinking? Wouldn't the thinking patterns change in the process of being enlightened? That last line. Wouldn't your thinking be completely transformed through the process of enlightenment? Yeah, but process. Remember, we distinguished between a moment of self-discovery and a process of assimilation. Which is enlightenment. You can define enlightenment any way you want. But this is what we're dealing with. There is a moment of discovery. That moment of discovery cannot possibly change all the neurons in your brain. It cannot possibly wipe out decades of samskaras, decades of habitual thinking. That moment of discovery is crucial, however, because it now prepares you for this process of assimilation. You can only assimilate knowledge you know. If you don't make that discovery, then there's nothing to be assimilated. So let's be very clear that if people say, when you become enlightened, is it a momentary event? And this is a tricky part, depends on how you define enlightenment. If you define enlightenment as self-discovery, that takes place in a moment. But if you define enlightenment as complete freedom from suffering, that complete freedom from suffering we called jnana phala in our previous class. We distinguished between jnana, knowledge, and jnana phala, the fruits of that knowledge. So in that moment of discovery, there is jnana. But there is no jnana phala if the mind is filled with these habitual notions. By the way, not every person's mind is so bogged down, so to speak, with all that, we call it viparita bhavana, this contrary thinking. Some people's minds are relatively free from that, and with the moment of discovery, they will indeed enjoy a considerable degree of jnana phala. But in my experience, that's not generally the case. Generally, there's a moment of discovery followed by a long process of assimilation. That long process of assimilation is exactly what we call nididhyasana. That long process of assimilation is what is represented by the lion cub looking at its reflection again and again. Okay, with that introduction, we can continue. I think we've spent quite a bit of time on the first few verses of this chapter, really getting to know nididhyasana. And so we'll be able, I hope, we'll be able to move a little bit more quickly through the remaining verses. We're now to verse 4. And as always, as I'm chanting, read the translation and then repeat after me. Sushupta jagrat swapatascha darshanam. Sushupta jagrat swapatascha darshanam. Namesti kinchit swami veha mohanam. Namesti kinchit swami veha mohanam. Swatascha te sham paratopya satvataha. Swatascha te sham paratopya satvataha. Turiya hevasi sada asmi. Turiya hevasmi sada drigadvayaha. Turiya hevasmi sada drigadvayaha. Very good. Okay. So here, nididhyasana is focused on the 3 states of experience. Can I request no one sit in the back row? I can't see you. And if I can't see you, I can't teach you. That's kind of how it works. Okay, thank you. So the 3 states of experience: Jagrat, waking state; Swapna, sleep, dream state; and Sushupti, deep sleep. Now, this is not an introductory class, so we're going to presume here that you understand that these 3 states are states of your mind. Make sense? Your mind is awake right now. Your mind was asleep and dreaming last night. And for part of the night, your mind enjoyed dreamless sleep. So these 3 states, which are often misunderstood, are 3 states of your mind. So with that in mind, we can see this first verse where he says, Sushupta, which is the deep sleep; Jagrat, waking state; and Swapataha, it's a adverbial ending, genitive ending. Genitive ending. Swapata, dream. So the darshanam, the seeing of waking, dream, and dreamless sleep. Darshanam, literally seeing. And seeing, of course, is figurative for knowing. So knowing what happens in waking, dream, and sleep. Who knows what's happening in waking, dream, and sleep? You do. You in your essential nature as pure consciousness, right? In your essential nature as pure consciousness, you know what's happening right now in your mind when you're awake. You know what's happening during your dreams, and you know the absence of mental activity during deep sleep. Therefore, you are the knower of the 3 states. It's actually very simple. These 3 states belong to your mind. You are the knower of your mind. You are the knower of the 3 states that belong to your mind. Therefore, they are not your states. They are not states, and you'll see this mistake. They're translated as states of consciousness. They're not states of consciousness. Consciousness has no states. You can call them states of experience, which is the correct term. They are absolutely not states of consciousness. Consciousness, as we've discussed in prior classes, and we'll discuss here again, consciousness is nirvikara, unchanging. If consciousness is unchanging, how can it undergo these states? It's actually very simple. But I find it ironic that by the way, this is one of the most profound teachings of Advaita Vedanta. It's one of the most confused teachings of Advaita Vedanta, but in essence, it is that simple. You are the conscious observer of the alternation of waking, dream, and sleep, the alternation that occurs in your mind. Therefore, these three states, na me asti, are not mine. So here Shankara is speaking to us in the first person, and Shankara is modeling nididhyasana for us. I find that very beautiful, very profound. Shankara here is modeling nididhyasana. So he says, these three states, na me asti, they are not my states, na kinchit. None of them, not at all, are these three states mine. When Shankara says mine, he's referring to consciousness. These three states belong to the mind, not to consciousness. But swam eva iha mohanam. Swam eva, they seem real. And Shankara is very terse right here. Swam eva, they seem real. Iha, here, during this lifetime. Due to what? Mohanam. Due to ignorance, due to taking something that is not you as you. Anything known to you is separate from you. How simple that is. These three states are known to you, therefore they are separate from you. Now, Shankara, of course, is a genius of the spiritual teaching, so he gives us some logic, some reasoning here to go along with that observation. And the reasoning is, te sham asattvataha, you see at the end, api asattvataha. Because asattvataha, because of their non-reality, te sham, of those three states, there is asattva, non-existence, non-reality. Those three states have no existence or reality. Swataha, on their own, parataha, or due to something else. Now, Shankara here, I think what is ordinary logic and reasoning for Shankara is going to be a little challenging for us. So here he uses philosophical expressions of swataha, intrinsic existence. You may not have come across these terms before. So swataha, intrinsic existence, and parataha, extrinsic existence. What is intrinsic existence? Is clay. Clay exists on its own. What is extrinsic existence? Is pot. Pot derives its existence from something else, parataha. So Shankara is using some logic here. It's a little sophisticated, but it's not surprising, because suppose there's a pot in your dream. The pot in a dream has both intrinsic existence and extrinsic, I'm having a hard time pronouncing that, existence. The pot in your dream has both. Yet the pot in your dream is still unreal. It may have both kinds of existence, but it is still unreal. And that's what Shankara wants to point to here. That for objects in the world, they seem existent, just like this pot seem existent, but ultimately anything you experience, and here we've had this discussion before, anything you experience in Advaita Vedanta is unreal in a particular manner. We've had this discussion before. Everything you experience is not unreal like the elephant in my hand, right? Everything you experience is unreal in the sense that it's not as real as you. This is Vedanta. Whatever you experience is not as real as you. And what is our measuring stick of reality? Persistence, right? We've discussed this before. That which always exists is real. That which comes and goes, we'll say, is less real. Your consciousness doesn't come and go. Real. Anything and everything you experience comes and goes, and therefore is less real. So a little tricky here when we say, when we use terms like mithya, which means false, but false here best understood, less real than you are. It has some existence. Unlike the elephant in my hand, it has no existence. But everything you experience has some existence, but less real than you. Then who are you? Shankara speaks here in the first person. Turiyaha eva asmi. He says, I am the fourth. Turiya. And this term Turiya gets often misunderstood because you think there's waking state, dream state, deep sleep state, and there is a state of Turiya. If you think Turiya is a state, please watch my video on Turiya. Honestly, it's a video meant to address this very confusion. Turiya is not a state in addition to the three. Turiya is the reality because of which those three exist. I'll say that one more time. Turiya is not a state of experience in addition to waking, dream, and sleep. Turiya is consciousness, the unchanging consciousness because of which those three states of experience are known to you. So that is Turiya. It's not a fourth in addition to three, but rather it is the one because of which the three exist. That is Turiya. And again, if you have any lack, this is very important. So if you have any lack of clarity about this, please watch that. It's a fairly recent video on Turiya. And that Turiya, that consciousness, is sada drik. It is always the observer, the unchanging observer, the unwavering observer. In our last class, back in chapter 9, we had that discussion about alupta drik, the seer that never blinks, the unblinking observer. Remember I showed you Swami Dayananda's alupta drik mudra? Remember that one? This one? That's the alupta drik mudra, to symbolizes an observer that never ceases observing. An unblinking observer, that's what it means, sada drik, and advayaha, non-dual. And we'll set that aside and discuss it, I think, in the next, at two more verses, the importance of that word advaya, non-dual. Now, a good example, we'd like to apply these teachings to how you would use these teachings in your own practice of formal nididhyasana. So we'll take the three states of experience, come and go in your mind. You are the unchanging witness of those. So remember the steps in formal nididhyasana. First, meditation. Make your mind quiet. And when your mind is quiet, then you have an opportunity to appreciate yourself as you truly are in your essential nature. When your mind is perfectly quiet, the only thing left is you. So that's our starting point, our base, our ground, so to speak. Then, after having rested in that silence for a few moments, then you can introduce this topic for nididhyasana. How would you introduce the topic? And maybe you could even use the metaphor of watching a movie. In a movie theater, you observe one movie after, better yet, TV or even your computer if you're watching different videos. So imagine you're watching a bunch of videos on a screen. How different is it when you observe what's happening in your mind? So this is a metaphor. Just as you observe videos constantly changing on a screen, in the same way, you observe waking, dream, and sleep continuing to pass in your mind. And then the next part of nididhyasana, after introducing the theme for contemplation, then you want to test that understanding. How do you test that understanding? You return to that silence. Return to that ground where you and only you remain, and you rest in that silence for a few moments. Then you come back and reflect on this. Did that moment of resting in silence, did it confirm or negate this metaphor of watching your mind like watching a screen? So you see the steps? So first meditate, then rest in silence, then introduce the theme of contemplation, then test that idea of contemplation by returning to that moment, that resting in silence, and then finally the confirmation at the end, when you think again and you find out, have I truly confirmed? Does what is present while I rest in silence, does it confirm or negate whatever it is you are contemplating upon? And we've discussed this before, so we'll do it a little bit more briefly right now. Then we can turn to the next verse, verse 5. Sharira buddhindriya dukkha santatir. Sharira buddhindriya dukkha santatir. Namena chaham mama nirvikaratah. Namena chaham mama nirvikaratah. Asatva heto shatataiva santatir. Asatva heto shatataiva santatir. Asatvamasya swapato hi drishyavat. Asatvamasya swapato hi drishyavat. Nice compound. Sharira, buddhi, indriya, dukkha, santatihi. Santatihi is a flow, something that continues, like the flow of a river. Flow of a river is something very pleasant. This one is not very pleasant because it is dukkha santati. It is the continuation of suffering. The suffering associated with sharira, having a physical body, having a buddhi, having an intellect, and having indriya senses. It is the continued suffering from one life to another life to another life due to karma, ultimately due to karma. Oh, yeah, I have to show that. Okay. And Shankara says, in the second line, that continual flow of suffering, life after life after life, he says, name, it's not mine. It's the body, mind, and senses that get born. The body is born. But then, according to the doctrine of karma, the sukshma sharira, the subtle body from the prior life, is driven by the force of karma. There are many deeds that are yet to yield their results. For the sake of yielding their results, the force of karma causes the sukshma sharira to take another physical body for the sake of having those past deeds yield their results. You understand? Therefore, all of this continual flow of birth, death, and suffering belong not, Shankara says, name. They don't belong to me. They don't belong to consciousness. Who suffers? It's an interesting question. Who suffers? Ramana Maharshi was famous for asking questions like this. Who suffers? Suffering is a fact. Pain is a fact. But all of that takes place in your mind. As all of that misery takes place in the mind, it's known to you. And you, the knower of the misery in your mind, that you is unchanging consciousness. Since it's unchanging consciousness, it doesn't suffer. Suffering is an attribute of your mind. Therefore, Shankara says, name, all of that continuing suffering from one life to another life, name, doesn't belong to me. Nacha aham, nor is it me. I'm not the body, not the mind, not the senses. That's more obvious. Why? Mama nirvikarataha. And here we have that one more time. Because of my state being nirvikara, unchanging. Unchanging consciousness. It's in the common expression, sat-chit-ananda. Sat is pretty clear. Your consciousness exists. Chit, your consciousness is consciousness. And ananda, as you understand already, is not an experience of bliss, because experiences come and go and therefore are less real than consciousness. So how to understand properly that word ananda? Here's a good hint, nirvikara. Ananda does not mean unchanging. Ananda, technically it's called a lakshana, a pointer. And it points to the true nature of yourself. Obviously, the true nature of yourself is not experiential bliss that comes and goes. But the true nature of your consciousness is certainly nirvikara. Nirvikara, unchanging. Unchanging means never subject to suffering. That's why they call it ananda. It is never subject to suffering. Okay. Then, Shankara, it's interesting. In fact, I'm just recognizing this. He does, not in every verse, but in this verse and a prior verse, Shankara is both giving us nididhyasana and manana. Manana, as you know, is this using logic and reasoning to remove doubts. And he's sneaking it in here, Shankara, being very clever, sneaks in a little manana here. He gives us the reasoning, the logic. And the logic or reasoning he gives in the third line, he says that this continuing flow of suffering, life after life, doesn't belong to me. Why? Third line, asattva heto hocha santatehe tata eva. In this way, santatehe, this continuing flow of life, death, and suffering, this continuing flow has a sattva hetu. It has an unreal cause. Now, Shankara can use this language. It's pretty challenging if you don't take a moment to understand. He is saying that the cause for this continuing flow, life after life of suffering and more suffering and more suffering, he says the cause for that, the cause for being reincarnated again and again, he says the cause is not real. Now, what does he mean? And the point is, if the cause is not real, the effect is unreal, right? This is reasoning, this is logic, this is Shankara's brilliance. If the cause is unreal, the effect is unreal. The effect we're very familiar with. It's right here, right now. This body which got born. Let me go to the board. I need to show you something here. Okay. So the effect is this flow of getting born again and again and again. And it's being born into a life of suffering. If life was always free from suffering, who would mind getting born again and again? But the fact is, every life involves some suffering, sometimes much suffering, and that's the problem. So, what is the cause for getting born again and again and again? Most of you understand that the cause is karma. Why did you get born this time? Karma's left over from prior lives. Then, why did you commit all those karmas in your prior life? Well, natural. To act is natural, and those actions are driven by desire. Raga and dvesha, to use the terms from our Bhagavad Gita class, those actions that we commit are all motivated by desire. If you were desireless, what is there to do? Nothing to be done. So desire is the fundamental motivation for action. Now, why do you have that desire? If your true nature is sat-chit-ananda atma, if your true nature is divine, so to speak, why are you filled with all these desires? And the obvious answer is your true nature might be sat-chit-ananda, but you might not know it. As we say again and again, the true self is covered, so to speak, by a veil of ignorance. You fail to recognize your true nature. Failing to recognize your innate divinity, of course you'll have desires. So that leads us then to the third element of vidya, ignorance. So ignorance of your true nature leads to desires. Desires lead to actions. And actions left over from past lives cause you to get reborn. And when you're reborn, do you get reborn enlightened or reborn with ignorance? Here's the santati. This is the continuation, life after life after life. Santati means a flow, and this describes that flow. Shankara said, though, in the third line, that the cause for this santati is not real. And where is the cause for the santati? Avidya. How real is ignorance? And by the way, the study of ignorance is both complicated and useless. I mean, by studying ignorance, what do you hope to get out of it? But from a logical standpoint, there is quite a bit to be analyzed. And if you analyze ignorance, I'm not saying you should. Like I said, it's spending lots of time analyzing ignorance is not going to make you enlightened. But one thing we should understand, ignorance cannot possibly be real if it goes away. Remember our definition of reality. It doesn't come and go. So you're born with ignorance, but it can definitely be removed. Already so many kinds of ignorance have already been removed for you. This particular ignorance, that veil, so to speak, covering your true nature, that can be removed. The fact that it can be removed establishes that it is not real, and that's what Shankara says in the third line. And in the fourth line he continues, he says that, third line, because the flow third line, because the flow of body, of birth after birth after birth, because that flow has an unreal cause, ignorance, therefore, he concludes, asatvam asyaha, that asyaha, for that flow, that continuation of birth after birth after birth, it is asatvam. The whole flow is unreal. If the cause is unreal, the effect is unreal. So he's saying that go back to the board, so if the cause is unreal, avidya, therefore the whole cycle is unreal, kama and karma and everything in life. And again, unreal in the sense less real than you are, not unreal like the elephant in my hand. And he concludes, he says, swapata hi drishyavat. It's he because it's like what you drishyavat, it's like what is seen in a dream. Whatever is seen in a dream goes away when you wake up. How real is that? And for Shankara, this whole cycle goes away when you wake up. This is an interesting metaphor for enlightenment, and it's a metaphor. When you wake up out of the dream, you know that whatever you experienced in the dream was unreal. When you wake up out of ignorance of your true nature, when you wake up out of this kind of dream, which is a much more real dream, but you can still wake up. And when you wake up to this reality, you understand that this reality is also, like the dream, it's not as real as you. Okay, for nididhyasana, we saw in that second line, nirvikarataha, and this is one of the most perhaps important kinds of nididhyasana, to recognize your consciousness as being unchanging. This is crucial. And the way you do that in nididhyasana, we've actually talked about it before, but very briefly right now, to appreciate your nature as unchanging consciousness, you rest in silence. Then you ask yourself a question. Did anything change while I was resting in silence? Nothing is changing. So that moment of silence is an opportunity to recognize your consciousness as unchanging. And there's a question that came with regard to that. Please, I've used the expression resting in yourself. And I describe that as a poetic way of saying, just be who you are in the absence of mental activities. It's pure silence of the mind, and you as consciousness continue unchanged. So the question, please briefly elaborate on what does that mean, to rest in yourself? Does that mean that I have no thoughts but I still have sensations of my body. So it's possible, if you are an experienced meditator, you know that this is a common condition. You can make your mind thought-free. And you know that verbal thinking, usually we think in words, that voice in your mind. If you're an experienced meditator, you know how to shut that off. It's not a big deal. If you haven't learned to do that yet, you need to practice more meditation. That's one of the fundamentals of meditation, is learning how to turn off that voice in your mind. When that voice in your mind is turned off, there are no thoughts. You're thought-free. You're conscious, you're thought-free, but you might be aware of sensations in your body. You're breathing, your heart is beating, you might feel your heart beating. You can feel the weight of your body pressing down on the seat. There are a lot of sensations that continue in your body, even when you're thought-free. But here's the point. If you're paying attention to sensations in your body, you're not resting in yourself. Resting in yourself means 100% of your attention, excuse me, 100% of your attention is withdrawn from being extrovert and focused on yourself. So it's withdrawing your attention completely. When your attention is completely withdrawn, there may be sensations in your body, but you're not paying attention to them. Your attention is 100% introvert. So if you are having that kind of meditation in which your verbal thinking comes to an end, but you continue to pay attention to your sensations in your body, you need a further technique to withdraw your attention from the sensations in your body. There are many techniques to do that. My course in meditation has a lot of techniques that you could use so you can withdraw your attention from your body. Okay, next. Idam tu satyam mama nasti vikriya. Idam tu satyam mama nasti vikriya. Vikara hetur nahi me dvayatvatah. Vikara hetur nahi me dvayatvatah. Na punya pape na cha moksha bandhane. Na punya pape na cha moksha bandhane. Na chasti varna shramata sharirataha. Na chasti varna shramata sharirataha. Good. It's nice when Shankara speaks to us. He says, idam tu satyam. This is true. What is true? Mama nasti vikriya. There is no change for me. I am changeless. He says, this is true. My true nature as consciousness, as Chaitanya, Atma, the conscious self, my true nature is na vikriya. There is no change for my true nature as consciousness. Why? And now here he keeps using logic. Because vikara na vikara hetuhu. Because there is no cause for change. Me advayatvataha, because my nature is a non-dual. And I said we saw that 2 verses ago. I said we'd talk about it. Now we'll talk about it. What is the significance of consciousness being non-dual? Now, it may seem like a philosophical idea that is maybe not essential to your realization of your true nature, but in fact, it is a crucial teaching of Vedanta. Here's the point. If there is something that exists in addition to your consciousness, it could affect you. If there is something else as real as your consciousness, it could threaten you. A famous Upanishad says, wherever there's duality, there is fear. So if there is a separate entity, an entity that is as real as you are, that entity, first of all, it will limit you. If your true nature is limitless, then a second entity would make you limited. You are an entity A, and if there is an entity B that's as real as you are, then the existence of entity B makes you stuck as being entity A and only entity A. The existence of B delimits entity A. So this is the importance of non-duality. Your consciousness is, and this is the highest teaching of Vedanta expressed in the Mahavakya, your consciousness is not yours. Your consciousness is actually the reality because of which everything exists. The non-dual underlying substratum. That's the highest truth. That is your consciousness. And since that is so, since your consciousness is the only thing that exists, then what is there to fear? How to use that in contemplation? Simple. Rest in silence. Rest in yourself. Then afterwards ask, is there anything present in silence in addition to consciousness? That's the question. Does anything exist in addition to consciousness? Then you can tell yourself, let me find out. You become silent, you rest in yourself, and afterwards you acknowledge and recognize. In silence, there is one and only one consciousness. There is nothing else. Another example of the formal practice of nididhyasana. Shankara concludes here, na punya pape, na cha moksha bandhane. He says, mama, for me, there is no punya or papa, good karma and bad karma, so to speak, nor is there moksha, liberation, and bondage. These all belong to whom? So look, punya and papa are karma, right? Karma phala, the results of karma, belongs to whom? The results of karma belong to whoever committed the karma, obviously. Whoever does the karma owns the results. So, who does the karma? Not consciousness. Avikriya, unchanging consciousness, cannot commit any deeds. Therefore, deeds are committed by this body, mind, sense complex. In particular, in the mind is that sense of doership, kartritva, and that's the origin of action. Therefore, karmas don't belong to consciousness. Karmas belong to the technical term, sukshma sharira. Karmas don't belong to consciousness. Karmas are attached to the doer of deeds, which is associated with the sukshma sharira. Also, moksha and bondage. Moksha and bondage also relating to karma. The one who is in a state of bondage and gets born again and again, and the one who gets liberated from being born again and again and again, cannot be consciousness. Tell me, Moksha is the end of bondage, right? That's a change. How can unchanging consciousness transition from a state of bondage to a state of moksha? Make sense? Bondage and moksha are not for consciousness. Shankara says again and again, consciousness is nitya mukta, eternally free, never subjected to bondage. Who is subject to bondage? The limited individual, in particular, sukshma sharira in this case. And the same applies to the body. Shankara says, na asti, for me, there is no varna ashramata. There is no varna, what we now call caste, and ashrama, stage of life, like being retired, like being a student, like being a householder. There is no, and Shankara was a sannyasi, so that's a stage of life. As Shankara says here, there is no caste for me, nor is there any stage of life for me. Why? Obvious. Ashariritaha, because I am bodiless. Ashariri, one who has no body, is consciousness. Consciousness is therefore free from varna and ashrama. Let's continue. Anadito nirgunato na karma me. Anadito nirgunato na karma me. Palam cha tasmat paramohamadvayah. Palam cha tasmat paramohamadvayah. Yatha nabha sarvagatam na lipyate. Yatha nabha sarvagatam na lipyate. Tatha hyaham dehagatopi sukshmataha. Tatha hyaham dehagatopi sukshmataha. Na karma me. Na palamcha. He's repeating what we just saw. Sri Shankara says, I have no karma, I have no phala. I have no karma because consciousness can't do anything. I have no phala because the phala belongs to the doer. So he says, anaditaha, because my true nature as consciousness is anadi, uncreated, and nirguna, free from attributes like being an agent of action. Because my consciousness is uncreated, because my consciousness is not a doer of action, therefore, na karma me, I have no karma, palamcha, or results of karma, repeating what he taught in a prior verse, but now comes something new. He says, tasmat, therefore, aham, I am advayaha, non-dual, as he said before, but here's a new word, paramaha, the highest, the supreme, the transcendent. Beyond karma phala, that which is transcendent. And he's hinting, like Ishvara. We'll see that in the next verse. We'll sneak it in. So, paramaha, transcendent. Transcendent in a sense, beyond the world, beyond cause and effect, beyond karma and karma phala, paramaha, transcendent, like Ishvara. He gives a common example. This example given in Bhagavad Gita and many other scriptures, yatha, just like, nabhaha, space, which is sarvagatam, which is all-pervasive space, na lipyate, doesn't get tainted by smoke or pollution or whatever, bad smells. So think of a bad smell, an unpleasant smell, odor. It affects air, doesn't affect space. So in the same way, tata, in the same way, You have to break apart the words. He, aham, he, indeed, aham, I am tata. Likewise, I am like space, utterly untainted. What's interesting about that metaphor is what is the distance between a foul odor and space? What is the distance between them? No distance, right? They're interwoven, so to speak. In spite of the fact that there's no distance between them, space remains utterly unaffected by that foul odor. What is the distance between your mind and consciousness? That's the metaphor. There's no space. They're interwoven. And yet, whatever happens in your mind doesn't taint, doesn't affect your consciousness. Once again, your consciousness being unchanging. So Shankara says here, deha gataha api. Even though you are associated with this body and mind and senses, even though you are completely unaffected by whatever happens to your body, mind, and senses. Why? Sukshmataha, because you are more subtle than your body, mind, and senses. And that's another way of saying you are more real than your body, mind, and senses. Now, in a prior verse, he used that word parama, supreme, kind of hinting at Ishvara, and we'll see that in the next verse. And it's very impressive, this next verse. Sada cha bhuteshu samohamishvaraha. Sada cha bhuteshu samohamishvaraha. Ksharaksharaabhyam paramohyatotamaha. Ksharaksharaabhyam paramohyatotamaha. Paratmatatvascha tatadvayopi san. Paratmatatvascha tatadvayopi san. Viparyayena bivratasstva vidyaya. Viparyayena bivratasstva vidyaya. Sadacha bhuteshu samaha aham. Aham, I, that consciousness. I am sada, always. Samaha, the same. Sarva bhuteshu, in all beings. I am always the same in all beings. He's referring to all-pervasive consciousness. That one all-pervasive consciousness which is identically present in your mind and identically present in my mind, identically present in the minds of all living beings. So therefore he says, aham, I am Ishvaraha. Now, be careful when he says aham Ishvara. You might be, some people like to translate it, I am God. That's not quite Shankaracharya's intent. So our idea of Ishvara is one who, Ishvara as creator, sustainer, destroyer, the one who gives existence to us all. As consciousness, we all have existence as awareful beings. So just like, aham Ishvara, I would add the word eva, like. I am I am like Ishvara. Like Ishvara gives existence to all beings, consciousness gives existence to all sentient beings. Notice I'm making a slight distinction intentionally. Ishvara gives existence to all beings, sentient or insentient. Consciousness gives existence to all sentient beings. In that way, Shankara says, aham Ishvara, not I am God, I am like Ishvara in that sense. And further he says, kshara aksharabhyam parama. He used that word parama in a prior verse. He says, paramaha, he, indeed, I am paramaha, I am beyond what? Kshara and akshara. We've seen those two terms before in chapter 15 of the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, he says, I am, you break apart those last words, he, indeed, atta, let's see, what is the sandhi? There's a little grammatical hitch here. There's a sandhi problem. Anyway, I understand what Shankara is saying. Yeah, there's a problem here. Anyway, the problem is with the grammar, not with the teaching. So, atta, now, for this, now, he, atta, now, because this is so, okay, atta is an adverb, no problem. Actually, I take that back. So, atta, now, he, because this is so, I am uttama. Remember Bhagavad Gita, uttama purusha. Uttama Purusha, switch the words. Purusha, Uttama, Purushottama, right? Uttama Purusha, switch them, Purushottama. So he is making a clear reference to chapter 15, where Sri Krishna said, I am Purushottama. Now here Shankara is saying, I am Purushottama, but in a little different sense. But what is common between the two, when Sri Krishna says, I am Purushottama, and when Shankara says, I am Purushottama, there is one commonality, which Shankara says here. He is Paramaha, beyond Kshara and Akshara, just as Sri Krishna says. Do you remember these were technical terms back there? Kshara, that which is subject to decay, refers to Prakriti, nature. And akshara, that which is not subject to decay, if you remember our discussion in the Bhagavad Gita, refers to Maya, in technical terms. So kshara, nature, and Maya, the cause for nature, cause and effect. So he says, I am paramaha, beyond, kshara and akshara, I am beyond cause and effect. I am beyond Maya and the world that was created through Maya. He says, therefore, I am Paramaha, I am Uttamaha, drawing on the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. And he concludes here, Para atma tattvataha cha tata para atma tattvataha cha, because I am para atma, I am the essence of Paramatma. I'm the essence of Ishvara. The truth because of which Ishvara exists and the truth because of which consciousness exists is the one and same truth. He says, tata, in this way, advayaha api san, even though I am that non-dual consciousness, and we'll close our class with this last line, viparyayena abhivrittaha tu avidyaya. Avidyaya, due to ignorance. Abhivrittaha, I am understood, viparyayena, wrongly. Actually, oppositely. Not wrong, but opposite. Because of ignorance, I am understood wrongly. Shankara says, you think, if Shankara were speaking, you think I am this body and mind. You got me wrong. Due to ignorance, you think I am this body and mind. I have no ignorance, Shankara says. I know I am independent of this body and mind. I am consciousness. So here we see some of Shankara's wisdom and wit. This is a little witty, where he says, but avidya, due to ignorance, one thinks wrongly. You conclude wrongly about me. Shankara would say, I am not this body and mind. I am pure consciousness. Good. Okay, we'll end with our closing prayer. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma amritangamaya. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om tat sat.